All right. I do blame Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle, stain of humanity. Yes, Meghan, and I hope you're watching right now. I hope you're watching, Meghan, because you are the stain in humanity.
I don't think that she'll ever let Harry go, because she is so fixated on having a title that she doesn't even have or deserve anymore, right? Yeah. Technically, she's not part of the royal family. On paper, on the website, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and I think that's her biggest. That's anybody's biggest mistake in their entire life, to screw that up.
By December, Meghan Markle was publicly embracing an image centered on compassion and kindness. Carefully produced videos, gentle messaging about balance, healing, and family, and a lifestyle brand built around warmth and authenticity were being introduced to a worldwide audience. Everything appeared polished and intentional, presenting an image of calm, connection, and sincerity. But at that exact same moment, something far more serious was reportedly taking place well away from the cameras. Halfway across the world, her father was undergoing emergency surgery during an unexpected medical crisis. Doctors reportedly had no choice but to amputate his leg after a sudden health emergency became life-threatening. He was 81 years old. The situation was extremely serious, and while those events unfolded, Meghan did not appear at his bedside. There were no public reports of phone calls, no visible hospital visits, only continued distance that was reportedly handled quietly through representatives rather than direct public contact. That contrast quickly became the focus of intense public discussion. That contrast is what caused this story to gain so much attention.
Prince Harry wanted to make amends and come meet my dad. Wow, that's just crazy. I'll tell you right now, Prince Harry, if it has to do with anything with the Netflix crew and cameras, don't even bother. My dad's had enough crap from bogus PR stunts to last him for the rest of his life.
Not simply because of tabloid headlines or online speculation, but because of who chose to speak next. Thomas Markle Jr., Meghan's own half-brother, stepped forward. He wasn't a journalist chasing headlines or a royal commentator offering outside opinions. He was someone who grew up in the same family, someone who witnessed those early years long before worldwide fame, royal titles, or professional public relations teams entered the picture. Now, he says he's finished staying silent and believes it's finally time to tell his side of the story. He's writing a book, and according to people familiar with the project, its focus isn't palace drama or royal gossip. Instead, it reportedly explores the years Meghan rarely discusses publicly, including family relationships, personal connections, lifestyle choices, and photographs that he believes were never fully addressed. This time, the claims aren't coming from longtime royal critics or outside observers. This time, the story is being presented by someone from within Meghan's own family, adding another layer of attention and curiosity to the conversation. Long before the royal wedding, the palace disagreements, or the worldwide fallout that followed, there was already a warning that almost everyone chose to dismiss. In early 2018, only weeks before Prince Harry married Meghan Markle, her half-brother Thomas Markle Jr. released an open letter addressed directly to Harry. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't diplomatic, and it certainly wasn't vague. Thomas Jr. didn't present his message as gentle concern wrapped in careful language. Instead, he used direct and uncomfortable words.
Do you sense that maybe trouble may lay ahead?
I've always thought that. Honestly, I've always thought that because, you know, not that I want to bring up the fact that I wrote that letter, but I wrote that letter a long time ago in hindsight of her.
Let's start with what proves Thomas Jr. isn't just talking trash about his sister for attention.
Describing Meghan as phony, calculated, and a bully. He claimed she wasn't the person she appeared to be publicly and warned Harry that marrying her would eventually lead to isolation, conflict, and long-term damage. At the time, the response was immediate and largely dismissive. Many media outlets portrayed Thomas Jr. as bitter, while commentators labeled him irrelevant, unstable, or simply someone looking for attention during one of the biggest royal stories of the decade. Supporters of Meghan argued that this was merely another estranged relative attempting to undermine what many viewed as a fairy tale romance. The letter became more of a punchline than a prediction. Yet what made that warning stand out was how specific it appeared to be. Thomas Jr. wasn't making broad or generic claims about future problems. He described what he believed were recurring patterns of behavior, including control, careful image management, and the gradual distancing of people who questioned or challenged her narrative, points that would continue to be debated and revisited for years afterward. Following the royal wedding, the patterns Thomas Markle Jr. had described didn't seem to fade away. They appeared to grow even more noticeable. The growing divide within the royal family, the very public departure from royal duties, the increasing number of former allies who later became critics, and the non-stop media battles that seemed to follow the couple wherever they went all became major headlines. One after another, the situations Thomas Jr. had warned about appeared to unfold.
So, Neil Sean put out a video yesterday or the day before saying that Meghan and Harry are on the rocks. Well, I think I called that quite a bit ago. And, Prince Harry, I told you it was coming. Anyway, the video said that
in front of the public. That's the part many people find difficult to revisit today, because when emotions are set aside and the timeline is examined on its own, some observers believe the sequence of events deserves a closer look. Let's begin with what many people point to when they argue Thomas Jr. wasn't simply criticizing his sister to attract attention. When readers go back and examine Thomas Markle Jr.'s 2018 open letter today, what often stands out isn't necessarily the wording, it is how specific the claims were. He warned Prince Harry that marrying Meghan would not, in his opinion, bring lasting stability. Instead, he suggested it could lead to growing distance from his family, ongoing conflict, and long-term damage to important relationships. Those statements were controversial from the beginning, but they continue to be discussed years later. At the time, many critics dismissed the letter as nothing more than resentment. But not long after the wedding, reports of tension began attracting widespread attention. First came stories about disagreements involving Prince William and Catherine, followed by reports of increasing distance within the palace. What followed was not viewed by many as a slow transition, but as a dramatic turning point, with Harry and Meghan stepping away from royal duties entirely and separating themselves from the institution that had shaped his entire life. Thomas Jr. had also predicted what he described as a lasting separation rather than a temporary pause. After that came years of media battles, including lawsuits, interviews, documentaries, books, and competing public narratives. Former allies became outspoken critics. Staff members who had once been praised.
Do you sense that maybe trouble may lay ahead?
I've always thought that. Honestly, I've always thought that because, not that I want to bring up the fact that I wrote that letter, but I wrote that letter a long time ago in hindsight of her saying something about me.
Later became connected to anonymous reports of disagreement. Relationships that had taken decades to build appeared to unravel within a relatively short period of time. Wherever the couple travelled, public controversy often seemed to follow. Supporters and critics continued debating nearly every major decision. To those who revisit Thomas Jr.'s letter, this wasn't viewed as one isolated misunderstanding, but as part of a broader pattern he claimed to recognise years earlier. He pointed to issues involving image management, resistance to criticism, and what he believed was a tendency to view disagreements as personal betrayal. In his view, those were recurring behaviors that became increasingly visible on a much larger public stage. That is why some people argue this story is about more than simple luck or coincidence. They believe Thomas Jr. wasn't making a random prediction, but describing a pattern he thought would become more noticeable once fame, influence, and worldwide attention entered the picture. As a result, when he speaks publicly today, many people listen differently than they did years ago because time has changed how his earlier claims are viewed, and that renewed attention also brings fresh interest to another chapter, because between 2004 and 2011, there remains a period of Meghan Markle's life that many observers continue to describe as unusually limited in publicly available detail. At first glance, the timeline appears straightforward and easy to follow. According to Meghan Markle's public account, she graduated from Northwestern University, moved to Los Angeles, and experienced the same difficult journey that many aspiring actors face. It was a story of small acting roles, auditions that led nowhere, financial challenges, and the familiar narrative of a struggling actress working toward bigger opportunities. She has spoken publicly about those early years more than once. However, when some people examine that timeline more closely, they argue that certain details raise additional questions about what else was happening during that same period. During those same years, photographs circulated showing Meghan aboard luxury yachts in locations such as the Mediterranean, Monaco, and other parts of southern Europe. Other images appeared to place her at exclusive social gatherings, attended by affluent and well-connected individuals who seemed far removed from the typical world of aspiring performers sharing apartments, taking temporary jobs, and attending endless auditions. These were not presented as ordinary vacation snapshots. Instead, they appeared to come from private, upscale settings that are often described as exclusive, expensive, and limited to invited guests. That is where much of the public discussion begins. For some observers, the questions are less about the photographs themselves and more about the surrounding context. Access to luxury yachts and elite social events generally involves invitations, established connections, or relationships within exclusive circles. International travel of that kind can require significant financial resources or sponsorship, yet those details have not been publicly explained in connection with the images. While the photographs themselves have been widely discussed online, the circumstances behind them have remained the subject of continued speculation rather than confirmed public explanation. The images exist, and reports of invitations to high-end events have circulated for years. What remains debated is the broader context surrounding them. Meghan has not publicly provided detailed explanations regarding the identities of everyone pictured, how certain introductions were made, or how particular trips were arranged. There have been no extensive public interviews dedicated to those questions, leaving supporters and critics to reach very different conclusions. As a result, the photographs continue resurfacing whenever conversations about that period of her life return to public attention. For many people, the mystery isn't created out of thin air. Instead, they argue it exists because they see unanswered gaps between the publicly shared timeline and images that have circulated for years. Whenever one version of events is presented while other details remain open to interpretation, curiosity naturally follows. Those photographs, still discussed years later and still lacking additional public context, continue fueling debate rather than bringing it to a close. When most people hear the word yacht, they picture luxury vacations, beautiful coastlines, and glamorous social events. However, people familiar with elite social circles often describe yacht culture differently. They say these private gatherings frequently function as networking environments where introductions, personal connections, and social influence carry considerable importance. Attendance is often by invitation, with owners, organizers, sponsors, or well-connected guests determining who receives access. In those settings, relationships may open doors that might otherwise remain closed. That broader context is why discussions about these events continue. Rather than focusing solely on accusations or assumptions, many people frame the conversation around understanding how exclusive social networks operate. Unlike public casting calls or open auditions, these gatherings are generally selective by nature, and repeated invitations can naturally lead observers to wonder who extended those opportunities and why, leaving questions that continue to attract attention today. That broader context is important when people examine timelines and compare different public accounts. It helps explain why certain photographs have continued to attract discussion without, by themselves, proving any particular conclusion. It also helps explain why individuals who appear in exclusive social settings are sometimes later seen in influential professional circles, private organizations, or high-profile networks. In situations like these, context often becomes just as important as the images themselves because it can shape how events are interpreted. When details appear incomplete, people naturally begin asking questions. That does not automatically mean the answers are scandalous. It simply reflects how public curiosity often develops when information seems limited or unexplained. And this is also why people who were personally involved or close to the events often receive added attention. Those who were present may have perspectives that outside observers do not, even though different individuals may remember the same events differently. That is where first-hand accounts become part of the conversation. For Thomas Markle Sr., the major turning point was not a headline or a photograph, but a serious medical emergency. In late 2025, he reportedly underwent emergency surgery after a sudden health crisis affected circulation in one of his legs. According to public reports, doctors ultimately performed an amputation. At 81 years old and with previous health concerns, the days that followed were described as especially difficult. The possibility of complications, infection, and a challenging recovery meant that the situation remained serious for both him and those close to him. During that period, Thomas Markle Jr. has publicly said he was present with his father. According to his account, he spoke with medical staff, helped manage the practical challenges of the situation, and remained nearby throughout the recovery process. Providing care for a close family member during a medical crisis can be physically demanding and emotionally overwhelming. Experiences like that often leave a lasting impression and can influence how people view their relationships and priorities moving forward. Public reporting did not indicate that Meghan visited her father during that period. Any communication, if it occurred, was not publicly detailed. As a result, observers have reached different conclusions, with some emphasizing the importance of respecting private family matters, while others questioned the apparent distance. At the same time, Meghan's public projects continued, creating a contrast that became part of the wider public discussion. According to individuals said to be familiar with Thomas Markle Jr.'s perspective, this period marked a significant emotional turning point for him. They suggest that years of remaining quiet gave way to a different way of thinking about his family's story, and whether he still wished to keep private matters entirely out of public view. From that perspective, he reportedly began asking himself a difficult question. Why continue protecting family secrets if he no longer believed that loyalty within the relationship was being returned? Whether others agree with that view or not, it helps explain why he has chosen to speak publicly, illustrating how, once trust is believed to have been broken, silence often becomes much harder to maintain. What continues to draw attention today is not only what has been said about Meghan Markle, but also what has remained unaddressed. Over the years, various rumors, resurfaced photographs, and online discussions have continued to circulate. Meghan has not publicly provided detailed responses to every claim, including speculations surrounding photographs from earlier periods of her life. There has been no comprehensive interview explaining who she was with, how certain social connections were formed, or how particular trips fit into her broader personal and professional timeline. Her representatives have generally not responded publicly to many of these recurring claims either. That approach has become part of the discussion itself. Public figures frequently face rumors and inaccurate reports, and in some cases they choose to respond directly with additional context or corrections. In other situations, they decide not to engage publicly. Either approach can influence how public conversations continue over time. When questions remain unanswered, public curiosity often continues rather than fading away. That effect can become even more noticeable when there are periods of a public figure's life that have received relatively little public attention. Between 2004 and 2011, some observers have noted that Meghan has spoken less extensively about certain parts of that period than about other stages of her career. As a result, people have continued looking back at photographs, interviews, and publicly available information in an effort to better understand that chapter. Whenever a public narrative moves quickly from early career struggles to later success, some audiences naturally become interested in the missing details along the way. That curiosity does not necessarily imply wrongdoing. Rather, it reflects a desire among some people to understand how different parts of a public story connect together. When photographs and public accounts are interpreted differently by different audiences, discussion tends to continue instead of disappearing. Those questions have remained part of the conversation for years, and now Thomas Markle Jr. has indicated that he intends to share his own perspective in a future book. According to his public statements, his account will rely on his personal memories and experiences rather than solely on publicly available photographs or archived material. Whether readers ultimately agree with his perspective or not, his comments have generated renewed interest in that period of Meghan's life. If Thomas Markle Jr.'s book is eventually published as described, it is likely to attract significant public attention beyond online discussions alone. Much of the interest centers on Meghan's public image and personal brand. In recent years, she has presented herself through projects emphasizing authenticity, compassion, and personal growth. Those themes have become associated with her business ventures, media projects, and public partnerships. Because reputation plays an important role in commercial relationships, any widely discussed publication about a well-known public figure has the potential to influence public perception, regardless of whether its claims are ultimately accepted or disputed. Whenever competing narratives emerge, audiences often begin evaluating different accounts for themselves, asking which details are supported, which remain uncertain, and which parts of the public story may still be open to interpretation. Stories built around authenticity often receive greater public scrutiny whenever parts of a public timeline remain open to interpretation. That is one reason discussions surrounding Meghan Markle's earlier years continue to resurface. Different audiences reach different conclusions based on the same publicly available information, while unanswered questions naturally keep the conversation alive. Prince Harry has consistently defended Meghan, even when doing so meant significant changes to his relationship with the royal family and his public role. If additional accounts or new information ever become public, some people may revisit those decisions, while others may argue that no outsider can fully understand a private relationship. Ultimately, this discussion is less about rumors and more about how public narratives evolve over time. Meghan has generally chosen not to respond publicly to many recurring claims, while Thomas Markle Jr. has said he intends to share his own perspective. If his book is published, it will add another viewpoint for the public to consider, alongside existing interviews, reports, and public statements. Whether that changes opinions or simply fuels further debate remains to be seen. In the end, audiences will weigh the available information and decide for themselves. What do you think? Will another first-hand account change the conversation, or will opinions stay exactly where they are? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next update.